Everybody, and Happy New Year. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Plymouth Select Board Tuesday, January 3rd meeting. The Board of Selectmen have been in executive session since 5:30, and now we will call this meeting to order, and the first order of business is public comment. Is there anyone out there for public comment? Please. Please state your name for the record.
Meg Sheehan from Community Land and Water Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to speak during public comment. I'd like to speak about the drinking water aquifer and the impact of some of the development that's going on in town. Specifically, I'd like to speak about the proposed Claremont development in Colony Place, and that is at least 348 units, and the Select Board secret water deal with Claremont that was negotiated behind closed doors.
Ms. Sheehan, there was no secret water deal. You can state what you need to state. Don't accuse this board of anything, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. In October 2022, the town engineer issued a report saying the town does not have enough municipal capacity to supply water to Claremont. This was the third such report. They said the same for the Oasis and the Walk, and both of those projects went ahead with relatively short-term fixes. In November of 2022, the Board of Selectmen, the DPW, and the ZBA negotiated a water deal with Claremont for them to pay up to $2.52 million to fix a booster pump in the West Plymouth service area in exchange for an agreement to work towards town permits and town water for the project. The town DPW stated recently that the town has a water crisis. We heard from the town's Water Conservation Commission that there are many measures that could be implemented to save the town water. There have been 2 open meeting law complaints filed against the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Select Board for meeting to discuss the Claremont water deal. Attorney Serkey previously addressed this with the board. When the town received those 2 open meeting law complaints, the Select Board and the ZBA chairs were required to send those complaints to their board members and to meet within 2 weeks to discuss those complaints. Instead, from what I understand, the town council, apparently with the knowledge of the chairs, shortcut the open meeting law and never sent the complaints to the board members, and the boards never met to discuss them. The town has also withheld public records relating to the Claremont water deal and has denied a public records request with no grounds. The deal that was made provides an escape hatch for Claremont that is right in the Zoning Board of Appeals decision that they do not have to provide the $2.4 million. They can get water from the town by just simply paying the fees. The open meeting law and the public records law are to promote transparency and accountability in municipal government. With this Claremont water deal, if we do not properly address a holistic approach for our town water, and if we don't get it right, we will cost present and future taxpayers billions of dollars to treat contaminated water. And we cannot just look right on the Cape and Mashpee and what is happening there with their water supply. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? No? Anyone online? Oh.
Good evening, Board of Selectmen. Thank you. My name is Joe Falconeri. I'm a land steward for the Northeast Wilderness Trust, which is in the process of holding a 450-acre easement on Great South Pond. My job is to oversee that property. In the summer, I reside at 101 Powderhorn Road. I have a question regarding Agenda 6, the proposed purchase of a particular 360 plus or minus acre property east of Frogfoot Reservoir by the Department of Fish and Game. My question is the 300-acre plus or minus purchase for the Red Brook or C2 bog expansion mitigation? Which one? Could you confirm? Does the 360 plus or minus acre purchase involve lots M12, M11, or M15, or any other parcel or ID numbers? Could you please confirm? And when will the parcels M12, M11, and M15 be put into conservation restriction? Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Mr. Brandisi, could you get those answers?
Yeah, I can work with the resident.
Perfect. Any more public comment? Okay. Community Preservation Committee warrant article request. I believe Mr. There he is, Mr. Cohen.
Good evening, Bill Cohen with the Community Preservation Committee. I just wanted to read a letter into the record that we supplied the Board of Selectmen in regards to the request. At this time, there is no request. Dear Chairman Cavaco and members of the Board of Select, the Community Preservation Committee would like to thank you for your invitation to attend your meeting January 3rd. The Community Preservation Committee met Thursday, December 29th to discuss the status of CPA articles for Springtown meeting. The CPC voted not to request a special relief from the new deadline policy for the annual town meeting and will move the appropriate articles, if possible, to the special annual town meeting and the fall town meeting. The town warrant opening and closing process has always had a deadline, and it has been the past practice of the town to offer placeholders on the warrant. Since the town manager has announced this deadline would be enforced and no placeholders would be offered, the CPC is fully supportive of this initiative. The CPC commends the town manager on this new policy, and we support it. We believe that having all the information on time will give the residents, town manager, staff ample time to review the final language on the warrant. The CPC believes that this policy will greatly enhance transparency in the important public documents which elected and appointed boards and committees in the town meeting will have to review and vote on. The CPC is scheduled to meet Thursday, January 12th, to meet with the town manager and staff to discuss better ways of communicating as well as implementation of the Community Preservation Act. We invite and welcome you and your input. Feel free to attend or forward your concerns. Again, the Community Preservation Committee is not requesting special relief from this enforcement policy that's been put out. We support it wholeheartedly. I think it's very important that the deadlines are known by the community, whether it's boards or committees or anyone submitting any information to town meeting, that we adhere to these deadlines. I have had willing to take your questions, but at this time we're not requesting any special relief from your new policy. We support it.
Does the board have any questions? Mr. Helm, then Mr. Bletzer, then Mr. Mahoney.
Mr. Cohen, in your letter, you state the committee voted not to request the Board of Selectmen to put the CPA articles on the annual town meeting. The CPC voted to move articles that cannot be on special town meeting to fall town meeting. What articles cannot be on special town meeting, and what are you proposing should be on the spring special town meeting?
So the special town meeting, as we all know, is an opportunity for us as a town, as town meeting, to open up the fiscal year that we're operating in and make adjustments. So the special allows us to operate in that area. Typically, after conferring with the Finance Department, the CPC will make a determination of whether or not they want to put an article at the special, especially when it comes to land acquisitions, because land acquisitions, obviously, we want to, once we have agreed upon price and we get to town meeting and town meeting takes action, we want to close as soon as we can. So we typically would consider a special town meeting for a land acquisition. We often do this. You'll see in spring special town meeting land acquisition so that we can act on that immediately following town meeting. This is something that we do after conferring with the finance department. If it can't go on the special, we go to the fall or the annual.
Is there a purchase that the CPC wants to engage in that you will be bringing to special town meeting?
There's a possibility of an article, but if we can't bring it to the special, we'd bring it to the fall, and we would operate under a purchase and sales agreement with the sellers so that we had, legal coverage to get to the fall to make the recommendation and then act on it after fall town meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Blitzer.
Yeah, Bill, now, if it doesn't go till the fall, you're not going to be able to spend any money. Is this going to be a hardship? Oh, I shut it off. Okay, thank you. Bill, I'll say it again. If this doesn't go on, the annual, and it goes to the fall, will this be a hardship for you? Do you have appraisals that you need to spend money on? Because you're not going to be able to spend any money till, I believe, October.
Yeah.
So
We do have access to our administrative fund up until July 1st, 2023. And if the new policy is in place, obviously in August, the warrant would open and close, and we would have to be prepared for that. That means we're already moving up our application process to accommodate that new schedule. So would be, if we're doing any due diligence for fall town meeting, where a warrant is opening for October in August, and we need to meet those deadlines, we will be doing all our appraisal work for anything that comes before us under consideration before July 1st. We would be getting that in order. And as of July 1st through October, we wouldn't be doing enough activity that would greatly undermine the Community Preservation Committee's ability to process an application. Typically, when we do appraisals, we will share the cost with the entity that's applying for the funds. Sometimes we share that cost. Sometimes the cost is carried by nonprofit organizations relevant to open space, housing, or historical. They'll carry the appraisal cost. We do reserve the possibility of the CPC covering appraisal cost, but in this case, we think that the policy is very important, kind of beyond the Community Preservation Committee. This is a policy that's going to affect every committee and board in town, department, and it's important that it's administered equally across the town, in that, coming in and asking for relief would undermine the effectiveness of making people adhere to this policy. We didn't want to set a precedent by requesting this relief in the environment of how important this policy is. I think that the town manager and town staff have come upon something that is quite interesting, that over the last 21 years, the Community Preservation Committee has been taking advantage of a placeholder process where in the past placeholders were given out at the time of the warrant closing, and final language wasn't really due until just before your board would sign the warrant, and shortly after you signing the warrant, it would have to go before the Finance Committee and the Select Board for consideration and a vote, and before it made its way to caucuses and town meeting. So really, we didn't really have an intact warrant until late in January for the general public to review. They would only have a week or so or two before these things went to the first committee hearings. So having this new policy where everybody has to get everything in the second week of December gives the residents of Plymouth 5 weeks to review the warrant before it's voted on, rather than 1 week. So the transparency is quite impressive. We want to support it. We want to support the town's initiative, and we can manage our affairs through October without undermining our application process.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank your committee, too, for understanding that, and I'm sure all the department heads really appreciate it, too, as well, so thank you very much.
Mr. Helm.
Yeah, let me just step in here and kind of riff on the last bit of conversation you had. Why did the CPC not meet the warrant deadline?
Well, I guess from what I can learn, that the past practices of the town for the last 21 years when it came to this is we expected to have this information in after the holidays. But the town manager announced this policy, I think, to the committee on the 20th. The committee realized this. We started to increase our meeting schedule that usually we don't have during the holidays to meet that. We were under the impression that the deadline was on the 22nd of December. It turned out it was on the 21st at 4 o'clock. So we missed that deadline. But we were able to do something that we haven't done in 21 years and get all our work done by the 22nd of December rather than the 22nd of January. So it was a kind of a file drill that we showed ourselves that we could do it. And we will do it for the fall, and we will adhere to these dates that have been put before us.
Mr. Mahoney?
Harry, you all set?
Yeah, thanks.
I'll make a motion that the board supports putting 3 articles on for the CPC for annual town meeting. One article for $1 million pay down for the Stevens Field project. Second article for a $1.1 million, or number to be provided specifically by the finance director for the contribution for the Jenny Pond dredging. And the third one for the annual set-aside routine maintenance admin function to set aside the funds that'll be available July 1st. And I'll expand on my rationale if I get a second.
Do we have a second?
For discussion.
I'll second.
John, can you explain your reasoning for this? We just heard from the committee that they want to put this on for the fall meeting. Can you explain your reasoning to vote?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Charlie. So I completely disagree with the notion that this committee can operate without money post-July 1st. It's factually inaccurate. It can't happen. I've been there before. I've sat through committee meetings where you're actually signing off on dozens of invoices. Certain vendors coming in, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, providing services for the CPC, removal of trees, appraisers, things of that nature. There was a CPC meeting last Thursday by Zoom. I was unable to attend. That article, that 4th article, has been on the spring annual town meeting for the last 20 years. It is there every year, and it overlaps year over year so that when the one fiscal year ends June 30th, when the clock strikes midnight and you move into July 1st, that next fiscal year, you have money available to you. So what we're doing is, we're saying, hypothetically, as the community in Massachusetts that has the most land in Chapter 61, that if a land opportunity comes before us in July or August, we don't have any money available for an appraisal. And I'm not going to sit there and tell an appraiser, we'll pay you in 4 months. That's embarrassing. And I've seen that happen before. I'm a little stunned that the Community Preservation Committee last Thursday night voted to put this community in a fiscal disadvantage. And that's where I stand on that one. Now, if you're going to send that one to town meeting, you might as well send the $1 million pay down for Stevens and the $1.1 million contribution, which is the 100% of the contribution for the Jenny Pond dredging. So we were in a CPC meeting on Thursday night, December 8th. Prior to that, at 6 p.m., there was a Stevens Field committee meeting, fairly well attended by the town manager and other certain department heads and town staff. We went into the CPC meeting in the same room afterwards, and we discussed the 4 articles. And what happened was the committee was effusive in its praise of our current finance director and whatever she wanted to do with respect to those 2 paydowns, we would do. So the new revenues coming in July 1st, which we know is a surcharge on our property tax and a contribution from land transactions from the other 350 communities, is roughly $4 million. The professional, the CFO of the $300 million business, advises the community to do a $1 million pay down and then the entire nut, which is roughly 1.1 million on the Jenny Pond dredging. Mr. Gould, on the Jenny Pond dredging, I believe in a few months is expected to get an announcement on a grant that will be the matching. God willing, we get that. Obviously, that's his track record. In a perfect world, that job would go out to bid in late fall, and that project would be done over the winter of 23-24. Stevens Field, I believe, is going to go out bid soon. Obviously, there's some question marks with respect to where the contractors are going to come in on that one. But I don't know why we're waiting. If we're going to send one, and again, the fourth one is going forward, because I'm not putting this community at a fiscal disadvantage. It's not good business. And if we're going to do that, the other two are simple and straightforward. Those three should go to the annual. There's a motion on, point of order, there's a motion on the floor, Madam Chair.
Mr. Helm.
A question for our finance director. Thank you. A question for our finance director. Mr. Mahoney, referred to fiscal aspects of this. Would you please weigh in and explain what possible ramifications there would be for delaying, the Jenny Pond, the pay down, and Article D, the organizational funding?
So the only one really the only one I would be concerned about is the original Article 16D that they submitted for the set-asides and the budget, particularly the budget. So the committee would have no authority to spend any money out of their annual budget until, if they were waiting until the fall to present it to town meeting, they would not be able to incur any expenses until 10 days after the fall town meeting. They would not be able to spend any money from July 1st until, sometime, probably almost the end of October. That would be my concern.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Mr. Bledsoe.
No.
Again, we set a policy, and the committee's adhering to our policy, and I asked them, do you need to spend any money? Will this be a hardship? They say it's not going to be. So I just have a hard time.
It's going to be, Charlie.
Well,
absolutely.
We have a committee that doesn't think so, and I'm not hearing 100% from the town that it's gonna hurt us. It's not. So I just have a hard time. This is going to undermine our policy, and it's going to set us up for abuse in the future. We'll let this go. What's going to happen next time? Well, you did it for this group, so I just. I don't see it, so I'm torn on this vote, but I think I'm going to listen to what the committee says and do what the committee wants.
Do you have something?
No.
I actually disagree, Charlie, because, I believe that any board and committee can come before the select board and we can make an honest, important decision by saying, yes, we will waive that policy, and it's important, and quite frankly, to not have funds available for the town of Plymouth. What happens if someone comes up to us and says, I have 200 acres ready for sale, and I want the town to purchase it, and what are we supposed to say? Oh, sorry, we can't even think about it for another 4 or 5 months? I think that puts the town in quite a predicament that is, I have to agree with John, is not very business-minded. So I actually support Mr. Mahoney's motion to put all of them on spring town meeting. Mr. Brandisi.
So I was just conferring with our finance director, and so part of the dilemma we're facing here is that we're in uncharted waters. And as we understand the CPA, Community Preservation Act, we believe that CPC needs to make a recommendation to the board. And so I guess I would suggest that possibly we may want to table this until we can check with the CPA to determine whether or not CPC has to make that recommendation, or if the select board can place these articles on the warrant unilaterally.
Sure, we can do that. Mr. Shirley, you're standing there, so I'm going to...
No problem. So the discussion at the meeting was pretty clear. If we hadn't heard about this new policy that occurred 2 days before our meeting, things would be quite different. But we're trying to honor the policy that the town manager has put into effect. And we think it's a great idea overall, because that's going to mean that people are going to have to come to us well ahead of time to get us the information so that we can act on articles into the future. So that's what the discussion that occurred at the meeting is. We're trying to honor a new policy that was just presented to us 2 days before our meeting.
Mr. Helm.
Would you, so you are confirming that you are maintaining that you were informed of this new policy 2 days before the meeting?
Yes.
Mr. Brandisi, would you please respond?
So I sent an email to all CPC members, and I'm looking at it right now, on November 20th with the link to the new policy. It was in this email. I was asking to be on a future agenda so I could talk to them about this policy and other policies that are important to CPC and to the town. So again, this email with the policy link was sent to the entire Community Preservation Committee on November 20th.
I don't disagree that that policy was set, but was not discussed by the committee until our next scheduled meeting. We do have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Brindisi in January, and we'll try to use this as a platform to move more effectively into the future, obeying the policy.
So I just want to confirm once again, you were informed more than 2 days before the
As
deadline.
individuals, not as a committee, and I'll let the chair speak to
I'm
it.
very confused about that point you're making, Mr. Shirley. Very confused.
Let me just confirm what the town managers indicated, that on November 20th, the entire Community Preservation Committee received an email stating this is the new policy. The letter was dated the 15th of November, and we had that information on the 20th. When we met at our next meetings, we adjusted our schedule, knew that we would have to meet a few more times we were waiting for appraisals and things of that nature before we took our final votes. So we were under the impression that it was the 22nd, and that's why we scheduled meeting on the 22nd, but it turned out to be the 21st. So I just want to confirm that we did all receive an email from the town manager on the 20th of November. Attached was a letter dated the 15th of November that the policy was going to be changing. But again, I can tell the committee that the administrative costs are there for appraisals. And if we had to do an appraisal, we would not put the town at risk. No land would go unappraised or unreviewed by the committee. Like I said before, there are other revenue streams that we can utilize for the appraisal process if necessary, in terms of how we've done it in the past. So again, if we are recommending anything to fall town meeting and our fiscal budget is not available after July 1st and we have warrants to adhere to in August, our appraisals and our costs are already going to be incurred before July 1st to meet those deadlines. So we don't feel as if we're putting the committee at risk. It's not. We think it was more important to support the Board of Selectmen and the town manager on their new policy, which is incredibly important. For the first time in 21 years, there is this idea that all language will be submitted by all departments and all committees and boards on this deadline. I think it's an excellent policy, and we want to adhere to it. We don't want to set a precedent by breaking it and asking for relief when we have other options. That would not put the CPC at jeopardy.
Mr. Mahoney.
So in the last meeting of November, I did, the topic of the new policy did come up, and it was met with certain hostile actions by individuals in the room. I told the committee that I would have the town manager come into a meeting. I wanted Mr. Brindisi to attend the Thursday, December 8th meeting, but he had already had a prior commitment, and I believe it was to be in this room for a tax forum. So, again, committee not meeting with, moving with any sense of urgency, obviously compromising the community's ability to do business, and doing something that is unprecedented in 20 years, putting the community in a negative fiscal position.
Well, I think the explanation from the town manager to table this and to see, checking with council if we are able, if the select board is able to move this forward, and if not, if the CPC has to recommend it. And if that is the case, I would suggest the CPC not wait and have a meeting and move forward to see if this could be a suggestion so we could do our business. One of the things that we all know that when, someone like Dave Gould or any members apply for grants, they want to know that monies are there that will match it or meet the criteria for what the grant is. And I think having to wait that amount of time would be detrimental to that. And the Jenny Pond project is a substantial amount of money that we could potentially lose. So that's my suggestion. Mr. Holm.
Just a point of order. I believe if we are to table, since we have a motion and a second, rather than go to vote, that Selectman Mahoney would need to temporarily withdraw it until that reconsideration point.
Madam Chair, what is our schedule? Are we meeting next week?
Yes.
Okay. I'll withdraw my motion, and hopefully the town manager will get the accurate answer, and if it falls one way, you can put it on as an agenda item next week.
Mr. Quintal has a question for Mr. Gould, please, if you would be so kind.
Hi, David. Are you in charge of Jenny Pond?
I am.
Okay, will this have any effect on anything that you need to do there?
So right now what we're doing is hopefully we'll hear back from the federal funding that we've requested for the other half of that. Hopefully we hear about that sometime in the spring. That's the timetable that we've been given. Those do tend to fluctuate. Hopefully that comes about. Now, we do have some timelines that we have to adhere to for permitting. So if we receive that funding in the spring, we would put it out to bid in the summer, and we would be obligated to do that construction in the winter based on time of year restrictions for permits. So that's kind of our timeline. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
like you need
I was gonna
that.
ask
You
him
need
that.
you
It
need the
would
money
affect
at the
it.
Springtown
We would have-
meeting
I just wanted to
because
make sure we got
if you only have the federal commitment, you can't unless
would-
you have the local commitment. You can't actually go out to bid.
We would need to-
until after October.
We could go out to bid. We couldn't award a contract without the full amount of financing in hand. So both the federal funding and the town share would need to be there when we award a contract.
Okay, would it be?
So that would be in the summertime.
Do you feel it would be detrimental to the project for you to basically tell people, we're going out to bid now, but we won't be awarding this until maybe beginning in November?
If I could just interject for a second. So we already have a vote from town meeting for the CPC share. We voted to authorize to borrow for the whole thing based on David getting the grant, and then when the project, and then in like the following year, we were going to use available funds to pay off that CPC share.
Okay.
So it won't restrict David from being able to award a contract. It's just that next, when we go to town meeting, whenever we do, either in the spring or in the fall, for the annual, that we would have those CPC funds available to actually pay in cash instead of borrowing any money for the CPC match. That's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney?
I'm good.
You good? So we have, you withdrew, and who seconded? Okay. And we will table this conversation till next week? Great. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yep. Oh,
Thank you very much. This all started with signatures when my husband, Selectman Rushforth, who's now passed, really felt this was important for the town. And Dickie might remember, he had 2 words, communication and cooperation. That's what this is about. I have to say I'm very proud of this board tonight and the CPC and the new town manager so far. Because what I heard and saw was communication and cooperation to do the best for the town of Plymouth. And I thank you all very, very much. He's very proud of you tonight.
thank you. Mr. Mahoney?
Madam Chair, just through to the town manager. Derek, we have a summit coming up with the CPC. I think it's a week from Thursday at 7 p.m.
That's correct.
You're on the agenda. I hope that's confirmed. You coming in with a delegation?
Yeah, it's my intention to ask our finance director, David Gould, director of environmental affairs, our assistant town manager, and Kelly McElrath, our town clerk, to all accompany me so that we can go over a number of different items for CPC.
Okay, I think Ms. Rushforth hit the nail on the head, and there needs to be a communication reset, because the CPC coming out of this meeting can be bigger, stronger, and streamlined and do more for the community. I would add, when you talk about the delegation and how it impacts and interacts with the Community Preservation Committee, I think Mr. de Blasio, if he's bored and has nothing to do next Thursday night and he wants to spend a couple of hours with a pretty talented group of people, I would extend the invitation to him, but ultimately that's your call. Sure. I would request through the chair that this be properly noted under the open meeting law as a select board meeting, so we can all attend the summit. You don't have to go, Betty, but, And then I would certainly advocate that you get together with the chair of the CPC to talk about the forum. So up until a few months ago, the meetings were being held in this building, or in the 1820, a room in the 1820. And, when you get over to the Arts Center, it's kind of like an echo chamber. And even if you only have 6 to 8 people in the room, if 2 people are talking, you can't understand anything that's going on. So I just want to make sure there's a comfortable forum, enough seats, and, there could be 20, 30 or more people at this event. So I just want to make sure that we're prepared for that, okay? And everybody can be there comfortably and not standing up against the walls.
Is there something wrong with this room?
We can just check the availability. Anthony, I'm looking at Anthony to check the availability.
I don't see any conflicts. Sure, it's
For the Great
January
Hall?
12th.
Right.
Yeah, no conflicts.
Oh, and the other benefit,
So we could have it here.
if you ended up having it in here, PAC Television might be able to televise it.
That's right.
The only issue, not an issue, but question, I don't believe that we could call that a selectmen's meeting.
No, it would be a CPC meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anything else from the board on this subject? All right, let's get on to our next fiscal year 2024 select board budget. Town Manager, Mr. Morandisi.
So this should be quick. This is the same slide deck that we discussed a couple weeks back when we presented the initial budget. What you'll see here, and we had sent, our Finance Director, Lynn Barrett, had sent out what is being presented to you this evening. She sent you the full report. there's only a couple of slight changes. And so there's an increase in this revenue amount, so of $9,353,087. We had to increase that number by the amount of $27,135. You can see that the town departments and school budget more or less remain the same. These are all the same slides you saw 2 weeks ago. So this is the recommended general fund budget of $278,297,268, which represents an increase of the $9.3 million. So as you can tell from the far column to the right, the overall budget increased by 3.5%. What you don't see on the slide deck, these are all old slides, what you don't see on the slide deck is that the total budgeted amount, which includes the enterprise accounts, is $284,733,611, which represents, again, a 3.5% increase. So, again, not any significant changes since the initial presentation, other than changing the revenue, other than changing the budget amount by $27,135, which we offset on the revenue side. So pending any questions or any changes, I'd ask for a motion.
Any questions for Mr. Brandisi? Mr. Helm?
The budget that we have here and that we're looking at includes the school operating budget?
Correct.
Okay. Now, it was my understanding that the town operating budget was lowered by a certain amount per agreement, and wasn't the school operating budget to be lowered as well? And did they lower it?
So the last time we had met, and that was prior to this initial budget presentation, which I think was December 13th off the top of my head, we had met with the school department to discuss a deficit of $1.6 million. During that discussion, we talked about using a typical 65-35% split, which is what the operating budget is, school compared to the town. We thought it was more collaborative to do a 50-50 split, and then each side assume an $800,000 budget deficit. That number is assumed in the budget on the town side, which is being proposed to you today. We're still recommending that on the school side, but as you have all read in the OCM, that the school committee has continued to maintain their original budgeted amount, of which is $800,000 more than what is being presented to you this evening.
So I see that that a vote is anticipated, and there was a motion that was asked for. We're being asked to vote on something that isn't actually set in stone?
So your authority is to recommend a budget to A&F. And then through the A&F budget subcommittees, in this situation, the school department's going to meet with the school subcommittee and would have to argue or make a compelling case to A&F to insert an additional $800,000 into the budget. So your budget recommendation today could be lots of things. Could be what I'm recommending.
So in other words, we're basically going to sort of just not pay attention to what we've read in the OCM and go forward with this, and then they can deal with the Advisory and Finance Committee.
If that's what the majority of the board votes, yes.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Although, is there any other questions? John?
Any comments, too? Lynn, we still at $2 million for using unused levy capacity. We're still holding at $2 million, which will leave us at roughly $5 million, give or take. And there's no one-time revenues, correct? Like
Right.
what made this, which compounded the current situation from something that happened a year or two ago. So I just wanted to comment on I took a day off from work last week to participate in this room at Capital Outlay, and I had never had that honor before. So I think I got lucky because Mr. Brindisi and Lynn put together a different process this year. And instead of, and I'm using round numbers here, so instead of department heads coming in with $10 million of requests, and there was only $5 million available. So you had to numerically and quote unquote maybe objectively rank all the requests, knowing that $5 million would get approved and $5 million wouldn't. There was a new approach this year, and the only thing that was presented was what the finance director said we could afford. So that took a lot of pressure off the process. That was one of the things I wanted to say. But the other takeaway, what I saw last week, and I'm telling this to everybody in the community, but especially the gentleman to my left, because he's from North Plymouth, and I know we all get sentimentally attached to certain things, and I grew up in another town, and they just leveled my elementary school, and I got permission to go on site and take 50 bricks, which I did, but I was kind of caught off guard a little by Adam and the woman from the school department. I forget her name, Derek.
Christina.
So they presented the requests, and I just wanted everyone to know that they're already looking at Cold Spring and Hedge with respect. They're only asking for improvements that just guarantee safety. They're not looking at anything else in anticipation of something happening.
Yeah, new schools.
Right, 48 years from now.
Say
So
the whole story.
I just wanted to let you know that, and are we having a joint meeting coming up soon with the school committee?
On the 10th,
Okay.
correct?
All right,
And
thank you.
That's
That's it.
if I could just address Selectman Mahoney's comment. He asked our finance director about excess capacity. So as Lynn confirmed, we're recommending to use $2 million of excess capacity. To Selectman Helm's point about schools, if the schools were able to make a compelling case to reinsert $800,000 into this operating budget, that excess capacity would go to $2.8 million. So in order to fund what they think they need would come from the excess levy capacity.
Did you? No, not yet. So I understand that we were trying to be, I'm kind of at.
Responsible?
Yeah, there you go. Fiscally responsible in trying to share the burden. But quite frankly, it's very bothersome to me, although I support the schools 100%, but I also support the town 100%. So it's very bothersome to me that we have taken more than our share to cut our services, and the school department has decided not to. So quite honestly, I'd like to stay at the 65-35, although it may be too late for that. But the town shouldn't always have to have the most burden and have our services suffer more than, I mean, we're all in this together, so we might as well share the pain, as far as I'm concerned. But that's, 35%, we wouldn't have to make all the cuts that we made. But now we do, because we are trying to be the good guys and share in the total, total cuts. So, Harry.
It's not my intention to add length to what is already going to be a lengthy meeting, but by your leave, through Madam Chair, I'd like to ask if our finance director and our town manager could explain to the people assembled and watching on TV once again the importance of excess levy capacity to them as taxpayers, and also put into concept that basically, because the school committee has decided to appears to have decided to go ahead and keep their budget the way it is, that extra almost an additional third take on a reduction of the excess levy capacity, how impactful is that, and why is it important? Why is excess levy capacity important?
I'll turn this one over to Lynn.
So I just want to be clear, because we've been throwing a lot of numbers around tonight. So we just set our tax rate for fiscal '23. The excess levy capacity on that tax rate was 9.2 million. So we're recommending to use 2 million in the fiscal '24 budget. So that would leave approximately 7.2 million of excess levy capacity. If the schools get their requested budget, that would be another 800,000 of excess levy capacity that would have to be used. And what excess levy capacity is it is the ability for the town to tax up to our levy. And in Plymouth's case, because of the nuclear power plant and growth that we've had over the years, we have this sort of gap where we don't have to tax up to the levy. We have this excess. We have this room to sort of grow. And it's like a catch-22. It's good when you need it, and then it's bad when you have it, because you keep eating away at it. And once you reach your levy capacity, you cannot go over that levy capacity unless you go for an override. So to use excess levy capacity, it's like going for an override, but you don't have to go to the ballot for it. So we would be taxing people for that extra. There are many cities and towns left in Massachusetts that don't have the ability to go over their levy limit. They're at their levy limit. And for example, if we had a really bad year of snow and ice, and we had $1 million deficit that we had to raise our following year in our tax rate, if you're at your levy limit, you already have to cut your budget $1 million because you have to raise that snow and ice deficit. So it's very important to sort of have that cushion so that for those types of things that happen, you're able to sort of, land on your feet. But it's concerning. I mean, we met with the board under prior management back in 2019, and in that presentation that we were just looking at recently prior to presenting to you, we sort of predicted that, we're going to start to have an issue in like fiscal '24. We're going to start to see that we keep eating away at this excess levy capacity. And so basically the cost of our budget is higher than the cost of the revenues that we're able to increase every year. That 2.5, the new growth, state aid, and local receipts. We have to live within, so basically if you took the 2 million off of the 9.3, we have to live with $7.3 million worth of revenue. But our budget, as you see, is increasing a 9.4 million, and that doesn't include the school's 800,000. So it's concerning, and it's quite a challenge. We want to make sure that we don't eat away at it.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Mr. Leyden.
Steve Leyden, I absolutely agree with the chair. Every time that the schools ask to cut their budget, they never seem to want to cooperate. We have a hiring freeze. We have jobs that are not going to be able to get filled, which probably might end up being overtime because we can't have these people because we can't afford them. The only thing that we can do is approve of the budget that we give the school committee. Once they get their money, we have no control over it. We don't know what they do or where it goes. And we're all in this together. We passed, 2 new schools, and, I think they should be able to, $800,000 out of their budget is not a hell of a lot, really. Enrollment is down, and, Mr. Mahoney was right. I sat to the Capital Outlay Committee, and all the things they wanted was for safety. But if you look at all the other division heads that come in, They weren't coming in for stuff they wanted or they'd like to have. It's stuff they needed. And that might affect them and their money. And why should always the town and the taxpayers always seem to get the hit? I don't think it's fair. I think they should eat their share of their, of the cost of running this town. They are part of this town, and they have no problem coming in and asking for $30,000 for uniforms or things like that, and they always get it, but they never want to give anything back. I'm sorry, but I support the schools, but when it comes to this, I'm tired of them not giving anything back. Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney.
Stephen reminded me, what I failed to mention earlier was that irrespective of where those things were ranked by the Capital Outlay Committee, because what was only brought forth was what we could afford, everything that was presented to us the other day is going to town meeting.
Ms. Davis.
Good evening and Happy New Year, everyone.
Same to you.
Ginny Davis, Precinct 4. I'm not here to argue anything, but just to explain, if people had attended, and most of us did, the tax forum, it would explain why it costs so much for the schools. Transportation, special needs, language. It's not about frills, but I'm not here to argue, just to remind people to understand, and also the school committee, just as the town does, really gives out, before we go to town meeting, we get their brochure, I guess that's what you'd call it, their report, and it spells out to the penny what the money's spent on. That's all. I'm not here to argue. I know it's a huge burden that you have to vote, and the school committee has to vote. It's not easy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do we have a oh, Mr. Quintal. You're going to have to put that finger up a little bit higher so I can see it.
I'm sorry. I'll do my best. I have to say, Lynn, I was talking with Betty this morning. I had the same conversation that you basically just said about the budgets and the new growth and the tax rate, and that's an opportunity to say why I think it's important as a town that we find an industrial zone, put a path forward, a master plan out, if you will, of how we meet this criteria. I know I sound like it all the time. Some people think all I want to do is cut the trees down. That's not the case. The case is balance. And as far as the schools go, I'm not really going to comment on it. I think I'm elected as a town official to bring the town's budget forward. We bring it forward and let the schools do their thing, and it's town meeting's job to decide from there. Let's just remember, going back a couple of years ago, we went to town meeting, we had our meeting. Well, were you on the board then, Betty? And we all agreed that we're going in united. We got there and 1.9 million, bango, right extra to the, so. And I was really upset with that at the time. I've gotten over it since, but I still remember it. So I say we do our budget the way we can. We request, we ask, and let each man go to town meeting to make the case, and that's what town meeting does. They make the case. But you're going to have these problems, and they're only going to get worse. And they're going to get worse until we have a plan where I could go on here for an hour, and it wouldn't put you to sleep, believe me. There's multi-hospitals that want to come to this community that can't, maybe pulled up stakes and left with good jobs because they can't get water, because they can't get this. I mean, this needs to be addressed. This is what I sit with every night. Not every night, but once a week or more, I sit and say, how do we go about to fix this for the town? When I say we as a people, we as a community. This town has a lot of issues. We've addressed a lot, but we still have a lot to do. And that's why I haven't taken out papers to run yet, and I haven't decided yet to stop the whistling on the Facebook or wherever else it might be. When I decide, I'll let you all know. But these are the things I wonder about not being finished in my mind. John brings up the school and head school. John, even if they will, I kind of know where that's going to go, I'm assuming. But it's for them to say, but I don't think I'll be picking up bricks. I think there's North Plymouth wants other things for that. They don't want to be selling bricks. We did that already with Cottage. We don't want to do it with Hedge. And in fairness, I struck up for the capital outlay, I think it was last year, for $2.5 million for Nathaniel Morton's new roof, out of the blue. So I try to build the relations with the school department, and I don't think this is the place to debate their budget. It's their job. They do their stuff. We do ours. That's the way it is. And that's my, if you want to vote against it or take some out of your budget, then go right ahead. But I don't think we should get into the game. We have too much stuff to worry about, really. I mean,
Can we debate consolidation?
I'd love to, but it's got to start somewhere.
Right.
A lot of things have got to start somewhere.
I have no problem supporting the town budget because I know how hard our staff worked on it and this board as well with our recommendations. And like I said, I love the school. I love their teachers. I have kids, one kid in school now, so I support the school 100%. I support our educators. We have some of the greatest educators that I've ever come across, so I guess that's not the point of it. So, but you're right. It's not us to debate, and I have no problem supporting the town budget that we have set forward. Mr. Helm.
I move that we move forward with the town budget recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. The next is the agreement with Claremont.
Okay, so what's in front of you this evening is a development agreement with Claremont Development, who, as I think many of you know, has proposed and been approved for a special permit through the ZBA for 198 55-plus units that would be for rental, for apartments, not condos. So I want to go back a little bit in time. There's a lot of misinformation that's out there, and so I want to be able to try to correct some of that with fact. And these are the facts that brought us to why we're having this conversation this evening. So this past summer, through the DPW director, we were made aware of an Environmental Partners report. So Environmental Partners, so folks are aware, is an engineering firm that consults with the town. They had done an analysis of the northern and eastern pressure zones here in town. And part of their analysis is they looked at this issue called firm capacity. So you hear me talk a little bit about that tonight. So firm capacity is simple. It's to provide water service and fire protection during a demand period, so like a drought, for example, with one of the town's largest wells that are offline. So they use that as kind of the definition to set the stage as to determine whether or not the town has sufficient water in order to support any development project. And so what they found this past summer is that using that firm capacity analysis, the West Plymouth pressure zone is in deficit by approximately 1 million gallons of water per day. It's not in deficit today because we're not in a firm capacity environment, but if we were, say, next summer in a drought with one of our wells down, we'd have a 1 million gallon deficit. So just so folks are aware, the largest well in that pressure zone is the North Plymouth well. It's also fed by the Federal Furnace well and the Darby Pond well. So I know folks want to criticize the Claremont development. The Claremont development represents, of that 1 million gallons, 30,000 gallons. So we have a water problem with or without Claremont. So that's a fact. With or without Claremont, we have a water problem that we have to contend with. It's an immediate problem. The chief and DPW director have concerns that if we don't remedy this problem, we could have a public safety risk. So in order to mitigate this problem, EP, Environmental Partners, they recommend that the town builds a booster station. Not because there's a lack of water in our entire system, in both zones, but we have a problem with moving water from one zone to another zone. And the booster station will be able to do that, move water. So this is where Claremont comes into this conversation. So again, during this analysis, the planning director told Claremont that their project can't move forward through the ZBA until we have a solution to our water problem. So no projects can move forward until we have a solution to this water problem. So Claremont came to the table knowing that they wanted to continue with this potential development, and they sat down at the town and we negotiated an agreement that in order for their project to move forward, they would be willing to build this booster station that EP recommends. We have 2 locations already pre-identified by the DPW where this booster station can be sited. But in return, and this is the development agreement, which is outlined in 3 pages, the town, the select board must be willing to waive all connection fees and building permit fees. So when we look at the total cost to building permit fees and connection fees, we're looking at approximately $1.5 million, approximately. Claremont believes the design and construction would cost them approximately $3 million. So in this situation, it's more or less a 50-50 split, public-private partnership, in order for Claremont to build a booster station to remedy this public safety hazard and provide water to all of the residents in West Plymouth, not just Claremont. Now, if this development agreement doesn't move forward, if the board doesn't support this for whatever reason, then I will be asking the board to go to town meeting to request $4.5 million to build a booster station. $4.5 million is the town's cost to building a booster station. $3 million is the private cost. They don't have to pay prevailing wage and have to go up to bid and things of that nature. So the other troubling spot in all this conversation, just today, a couple hours ago, I was made aware that Ms. Meg Sheen filed an appeal to the ZBA's special permit issuance. This appeal could be held up in land court for upwards of a year to 2 to 3 years if it moves forward. That appeal will kill this development agreement. There is no way Claremont's going to build a booster station knowing that they're going to sit in land court for the next 2 to 3 years. So again, if that appeal moves forward, I'll be going back to this board, into town meeting eventually, asking for $4.5 million of the residents, ratepayers of this community to fund a booster station that today can be solved by Claremont Development. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
So if the concept of them basically paying whatever it is to alleviate us a $4.5 million expense, if the development agreement unravels, what stops Claremont, if anything, from doing exactly what several others, including the Oasis, have, and I'm not sure if the walk was involved in that, as declaring 40B, because I don't believe water, the lack of water would be an issue in approval of a 40B. Are we possibly moving towards another 40B?
I'll be honest with
you. You can't talk for Claremont, but
no, and I can say that in every conversation I've had with Claremont, they never once mentioned the fact that they have the ability to file for a 40B. But as you know, Selectman Helm, in Massachusetts, the 40B is always out there. It's always a threat. So if this development agreement were to unravel, I think that is an option, that is a course of action that Claremont could choose to take. And as Lee Hartman has oftentimes educated us all, that water is an excuse to not permit a 40B.
Which is a remarkable statement. That's embarrassing. The state should be ashamed of themselves.
Mr. Blitzer.
I have a couple of questions, probably town council, if he can answer it. If you want to come up. Sure. First of all, I'd like to say that this is very concerning to me that we have an approved, it's gone through the boards. The ZBA put many, many restrictions. I mean, I don't know how many. I was there at that meeting, and it went on and on and on, all the different restrictions to protect the environment. It's a 55-plus rental project by a reputable group that wants to own the project. They're not going to just put it up, sell it, and let somebody move in and be irresponsible. They're going to own the project. There was a water issue that came up, after they were like 6 months, then they finally, so the board met to form a private-public agreement to fund this booster pump, okay? And it was going to save the taxpayers, as you said, $4.5 million at least. That might be conservative. So now we have, and no disrespect, Meg, and this is a question for you. Ms. Sheehan doesn't live in Plymouth, I don't believe. She's not a resident of Plymouth. So does she have any standing to actually appeal or sue this project?
So the plaintiffs are Plymouth residents on the suit that was filed today.
So she's just a legal
She's
okay.
legal
So it's not-
representative. It's my opinion, a fancy way around the issue here.
Okay.
And we were all looking at the complaint today.
So we believe, and I do, and I'm not afraid to say it, that this is just a stall. This is a stall tactic to hopefully this group goes away. We lost a behavioral hospital, medical facility. We lost them, okay, because of this. So now we're going to possibly lose this group. And who knows what's going to happen with that property, whether it's going to be a 40B, what's going to happen. So how do we stop, and I don't want to call this a frivolous appeal, but I don't see what merit they have here and what are the grounds. I know the open meeting complaints are not valid, okay? Just like what Mr. Cirque did the same thing, and I'm not going to get into that. But how do we stop this? Every time a project comes in, that a certain group, and there's actually a gentleman running for selectman behind all this, and how do we stop this group from stopping development? So, am I talking to you? I'm not talking to you, no. I'm talking to town council. So I want to know how do we stop this group from these frivolous appeals to as a stall tactic?
We were all addressing that today, including counsel for Claremont, and I have to say Claremont has been a partner in this, despite what's gone on along the way. And the counsel for Claremont has reached Dave Resovitz, the attorney for Plymouth, as well, has a prior relationship with him, and everybody's been working towards fixing this. But the suit that was filed today is not fixing this. I would invite all the Plymouth residents to look at the suit that was filed and really look at the facts as alleged. The facts as alleged in the suit do not match up with the facts that town manager has presented on this. We're going to, in all likelihood, ask that the plaintiffs have to post a $50,000 bond on this with the court due to, I would say, the lack of merits within that suit. So that's what we're pursuing.
So I just want to make sure, and this, thank you, Attorney Bergeron, for answering that the public knows, the people, as Harry says, the people watching at home, the people there, understand that if this appeal goes through and we lose this project, we're all going to be paying at least $5 million. We're going to be paying to get this booster because we have to get it done. It's an emergency.
Right, as I understand it, the suit could cost the Plymouth residents $5 million.
Right. So I just want everybody to realize at home or whatever that's, and if there's any reporters here, which there probably isn't, but that's what's going to happen if this appeal goes through. And I'm hoping that Ms. Sheehan changes her mind and doesn't waste taxpayer money.
Certainly could be withdrawn.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Can I have an opportunity to respond, which seemed to be a suggestion that I'm involved in this effort by Ms. Sheehan, that you're suggesting that? Who is running for select board that is behind
Madam
this?
Chairman?
Yep.
I'm not going to respond to you, okay? I have nothing to say to you. So,
Well, you just suggested.
I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I have something to say.
Well-
First of all, you made this right now, you made this into a political argument.
Mr. Mann, we're discussing the Claremont project,
And-
not, there are other people in this audience that are running for selectmen. You're not the only one.
There are people that have taken out papers that Mr. Bletzer
Yes,
is
there
saying
are.
is behind this effort.
Well, we don't know that.
We don't know that. This is the kind of lack of transparency. And
No, the transparency,
that is
Mr. Mann,
amazing
is that
to
you're
me.
posting things on social media that if you didn't have misinformation, you'd have no information
I thought
at
we were
all.
talking about what's going on right here, right now, and now
Right
you're
here,
talking
right
about
now,
social
the things
media.
that you are posting is not factual. You heard from
I tell you what, I'm also a member of the planning board, and I was here interested in this discussion because I was disappointed that as a member of the planning board, I didn't have information on this deficit, this water deficit, in time to truly give an objective analysis and order of conditions suggested to the Board of Appeals, as is the duty of the planning board.
Well, then maybe
So I
you
am
should take that up
disappointed-
with the planning board.
I'm taking it up with you right now because you're making a deal with Claremont. You're approving tonight. That's what's on the agenda, to approve a deal with Claremont tonight.
Correct.
To be able to adjust for this surprise to the planning board and other boards that there was a deficit in the water that should have been addressed before this came before us, should have been addressed before Claremont came before us, should have been addressed before many of these developments came before us. And as someone stated tonight as well, there are conservation measures that don't cost $4.5 million that should be addressed concretely as well. There are many other ways to approach this. And I'm sitting here as a citizen of this community, as an engaged citizen of this community, and I hear Mr. Bletzer making a veiled attack on me because I'm running for select board and behind this, which is a lot of bull and the typical kind of stuff I expect to see during this election, I'm sad to say. Thank you very much.
Mr. Leiden.
Steve Leiden again. I'm totally confused. Mr. Mann just said about a water deficit. I was told we didn't have a water deficit. I heard the problem was that the people in North Plymouth do not have enough pressure there, and that when there's a drought, West Plymouth, I'm sorry, when there's a drought, that they don't have enough water pressure to put out fires, to provide water, and that's the problem. And the problem is that we need this pump station to get the water that we have, because there's no deficit from what I've been told by the division, the head of the division of the water department. And he says the problem is not we don't have enough water. The problem is we don't have the pressure or the means to get water to that part of our town. So, and
correct.
40B, we all know what 40B can do to us. So, you know, there's a lot of things to look to look at when we decide about this. But it's not a water problem. It's a water pressure problem, and this pump station will take care of that pressure. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, distinguished members of the board and town officials, my name is Nick Shiritzi. I live at Sawyer's Reach. And I followed some of the planning board meetings for the Hanover properties, the apartment, it's 4, I think, large apartment complexes. And water was brought to the table at that time as a consideration for fires and water flow and so forth. And then this next project came along, and I'm wondering, what the wisdom was of the planning board to just let this project go ahead before this water situation was addressed. And it seems that we're trying to correct something, that there was a mistake happened, and it's the way it's being delivered to us now is this is going to be an increased expense to the town for a situation that the town created. But being a businessman my whole life, I would just like to say this before you make your decision, that a temporary fix for anything is not always a good idea. It seldom is. That no matter what the situation is, to do it once and to do it right for the long term, no matter what it costs, is going to be in the best interest of the town and the people in the area and future development and future hospitals that want to come in. If this goes 5 years, 10 years down the road, it's going to cost 10 times as much. I want to commend the town manager on something. Where everything else is up 8.5%, 9.5%, 10.5%, the town budget's only up 3%. So I think some people did some hard work to get to those numbers, and I'm impressed with your work and whoever else worked with you on that. So I touched on two different subjects, but before you make your final vote, I hope you'll consider the long term. I think, I'm a chef, what do I know? But I think the wiser thing is to just do it once and do it right. And thank you.
Thank you.
Meg Sheehan. I'm here with my hat on this time as an attorney who has practiced environmental law in Massachusetts for 40 years, and I strongly resent the implications by town council that the lawsuit that was filed, that I filed on behalf of 8 residents of this town who abut this intense development, inappropriately cited, is somehow meritless. And I would not violate the rules of ethics by filing a meritless case. And I would just like to point out that as far as this development agreement, I urge you, Mr. Bletzer, to read very carefully what the ZBA actually said. Because as the lawsuit makes clear, and as the ZBA decision states very clearly, Claremont does not have to pay up to $2.5 million. They can back out at any time, and they can simply pay the administrative fees, the municipal fees. That's what the ZBA decision says. In addition to that, 75% of the conditions in there, 75% of the conditions in the ZBA decision were delegated to Claremont to negotiate with the town manager and the town departments. That violates the very fundamental duties of the Zoning Board of Appeals to adjudicate zoning decisions. I'm not going to go into any further details about the complaint.
Could I respond?
No, I hope you will read it very carefully.
I have, and I was there too, and it's very clear that if it's not cost effective for them, that they can back out and put in the booster pump in. If they don't put the booster pump in, the project is dead. They will not get occupancy unless they do it. So
that is not true.
No, well, that's true. And if you have it in front, you have it once you read it. Because that was put into effect in case it went over the estimate. Okay, and then the project is dead and they won't get an occupancy permit. This is just the misinformation that we're talking about that gets out to these folks here. I was there at the meeting. I've read the agreement. We signed it. Okay? And so if you want to check that, Derek, you have that?
Yeah, I know exactly which section, because we negotiated this section in particular. And it's to Mr. Bletzer's point that if the costs exceed what they are projecting, so that, for example, if it's a $10 million booster station for whatever reason, they do have the ability to back out. It says simply right here, if Claremont does not contribute the pump funds, Claremont will be allowed to utilize whatever water connections are then available. In this case, there are none available, if any, but will be responsible for whatever connection fees, which would have been waived, may be applicable to not to exceed $1,500 per unit. In addition, the town's agreement to waive other fees as provided below shall be null and void. So Michigan's correct. They can back out of this agreement. But it says they have to utilize other water connections. So the only other possible water connection that they would have for an option is to build their own well. That's the only other possibility they would have.
Okay, I'm trying to read through the ZBA decision, which I have read very carefully, and it does say that they can simply pay municipal fees and that they can tie into the water system. I don't know if you read the actual decision as opposed to what was said at the meeting, but I would suggest that with all of these vagaries that no one really knows and no one really understands, that perhaps you wouldn't want to vote on the development agreement, which the ZBA incorporated into its decision in a draft final form. So when the ZBA voted, they had no development agreement because you hadn't voted on it. So this whole permit is, I dare say, a sham and a ruse. And it was really concocted in order to evade the zoning prohibition against the use of mixed commerce areas for residential developments. That's all I'll say. You can read the complaint, but to suggest that the residents of this town don't have a right under the zoning laws, which explicitly give people a right to appeal a decision like this and to challenge a decision and to expect that the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to objectively and fairly administer the zoning laws and that they can't go ahead and use their constitutional rights to appeal. I don't know if you've ever read 48, but it does give people a legal right to appeal a decision.
These same folks that are appealing this decision, okay, live in a complex that's part of our water problem. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Okay, I'm not going to say any more.
Well, everyone in the town who drinks water is part of the water problem. Excuse me, everyone who drinks.
We're trying to fix this problem, and we got a group that's going to pay for a booster. It's a temporary fix, Mr. Ceranci. It's just if it's an emergency, but we need to build a well, and you'll be hearing about that soon. But this is just an emergency situation that we got a group that's going to pay. It's going to save us $4.5 million for a temporary fix, till we can get a well built.
Well, isn't that the whole issue? That you did temporary fix at the Walk and a temporary fix at Oasis? This is the third temporary fix, okay?
Nothing to do with that. I know nothing about that.
Well, I'm saying that this is the third environmental partners report that told the town they don't have the firm capacity. And this is another essentially short-term.
I can't respond to that.
Well, you are dealing with a problem as a selectman, and you should be looking at it holistically, may I suggest, and look at the water conservation measures that were brought before you a couple of meetings ago that could, for very short money, address some of these concerns.
Well, quite frankly, there's a lot of projects, Colony Place being one, that should have built a well or put money aside for that. And the hotels that went in there, all those developments. Okay, but I don't want to get into that. I don't want to debate that tonight. This project, I just hope that you don't delay it. I want them to go through. I want them to pay for this booster pump because we need to get this done.
Well, you might also want to look at what the zoning law actually says in terms of granting a special permit and what the height restrictions are and what the density requirements are and what the water overlay district says. This project is located in the Zone 2 of the North Plymouth drinking water well, which overlaps with Kingston's drinking water well. You have a drinking water well in North Plymouth that's contaminated and is being treated and is contaminated with PFAS. Don't know if you know what those are. Okay, well, that's something to be addressed. So why not make a holistic approach to this and at least require this developer to test and have baseline testing and to also test for PFAS? It is not. There is no baseline testing in that zoning board of appeals.
We don't have any wells
decision.
that are positive for PFAS that exceed the action levels. We have no wells
currently, but those action levels.
But you can't say that, Meg. That scares people when you tell people there's PFAS in their water. That's not a factual statement. That's wrong. We did not have any wells that exceed the action levels of PFAS.
Okay, the current action levels, I will totally agree with you. EPA's action levels that are being adopted by the state are going to be 0. So if you want to ignore the problem and pump more water and pump harder on these wells and possibly draw in more PFAS from all the stormwater runoff of the 60 acres of the development that is going to be part of this whole thing, that is not even being addressed. Just to clarify, this project is being built and proposed on a lot that has not even been subdivided. So this is an illegal lot. There's no lot 5A. It's two lots currently that are going to be reconfigured into 3 sections. Phase 1, 198 units. Phase 2, another 150 or something. And then they are going to reconfigure the existing stormwater system for the entire colony place of 60 acres. That's all being segmented. It all should be addressed together under one zoning permit. Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney.
Derek, has the board been provided with a copy of Ms. Sheehan's complaint? Do we have that yet?
Not to my knowledge, no. We just, again, we received it like around 4 p.m.
And does the board have a copy of the official ZBA, the document that she was just referencing?
I don't know.
Okay, so
But I can get those if you...
I think the board would like those 2 documents for reading material.
Yeah, we can send those both along.
And then this next agenda item, it says Plymouth Development, asterisk, that's an overall development discussion? Okay.
Sure. Hold on, there's one more person.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Harrelson. I am a member of Plymouth. I'm a member of Community Land and Water Coalition, located at 158 Center Hill Road in Plymouth. Growing up, I was a third-generation summer resident of Wareham, so I'm very familiar with this area, even though I no longer live here. I have 18 years' experience in the environmental industry, and I speak here tonight as a representative of the environmental community. First of all, I would like to address comments made by, excuse me, I'm not familiar with your name, made by Derek, that there's misinformation being circulated around amongst the public, and I feel that this is a misleading statement. The public is very well informed on this issue. The Environmental Partners Report that came out in October of 2022 was explicit and very detailed in addressing exactly what's going on in Western Plymouth in regards to the 3 wells that supply it, the problems with the North Plymouth well, and the issue of firm capacity. These are what we would like to address here tonight, and this is what's going on in the town of Plymouth. The issue that I have after reading the documents and doing research on this issue is the manner in which this decision was made. It was not made publicly. It was not made with public involvement, and it was not made with a public participation process. The development deal with Claremont took place on November 15th, behind closed doors. This was a substantive deal with significant ramifications. There was a public hearing at the ZBA on November 16th, of the very next night at which I was present, at which the deal was only alluded to and in vague terms. The deal wasn't even written down on paper. November 16th was in fact the last public hearing on the Claremont development. The public had no time to respond to this whatsoever. I personally feel as though this deal has significant ramifications for the way that Plymouth handles its water issues in the future. What we have here is we have choices in front of us. I believe it was around December 12th that the Water Conservation Committee presented its findings of a 2-year study to the Select Board, in which the findings were not taken up by the Select Board. I think that what has happened is that development and extraction of natural resources has gotten us to this point in Plymouth's history where we now have water issues. We are leaving the point in Massachusetts history where we can be blasé and about water issues, and we are entering into the period where we are aware that if we don't take concerted actions about our natural resources, we will have public water supply issues on our hands in the future. We have choices in front of us. They were presented to this committee on December 12th. And I would like to call for another environmental partner study to what would happen in the Western Plymouth pressure zone if, in fact, the 15-year recommendations of the Water Conservation Committee were taken up instead of drilling a new well in Eastern Plymouth. Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney.
So I just want to rebuttal to the point on the December 12th. The volunteer committee came in. Mr. Cody and others did an extraordinary job over the course of the last 2 years to come in and present. They had the 3 recommendations. You're correct. The board didn't take action that night, but that doesn't mean that the board's not going to take action. Okay, and one of the big pieces of that puzzle was that the town manager, maybe the finance director and others were going to put together and look at putting this sample rate structure together, because one of the recommendations was going after peak demand times, summertime use. So that was one of it. We wanted time to allow them to get that piece of the puzzle done, that homework get done, and then the town manager would communicate that to the chairwoman, and then, God willing, in late January, February, March, or whenever, that would be back on the agenda. And we would deal with that one and the 2 other pieces, the recommendations that were brought forth. So that this is not a one-size-fits-all problem. You're accurate in some of what you said, but conservation is a big piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only part of the puzzle. I promise you, and I know that Chairwoman Kavako is not going to let that slip and gather dust on a shelf somewhere, and 5 years from now we're wondering what the heck happened.
I would agree, but the Water Conservation Committee findings specifically recommended against drilling new wells in Plymouth, and the study for a new well in Plymouth was potentially going to be part of this deal with Claremont. I don't know, I didn't see that language in the final development deal with Claremont, but it was mentioned at the ZBA hearing on November 16th. So this development has implications for the future of another well in Plymouth, which goes against the conservation, of water resources.
I'll save further comment for the next agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't believe that was ever part of any discussions about Claremont and another well.
The Claremont development is, they require 30,000 gallons per day. We have a 1 million gallon deficit. So for me, it's focusing on remedying this public safety problem first. And if Claremont benefits from that because they're building the booster station, then that's what they agreed upon. I can say the DPW director and EP have talked for years that at some point in West Plymouth, they will have to build a new well, and I think Mr. Bletzer reflected on that. So I don't want anybody to walk away from tonight's meeting saying that the booster station has solved all of our problems for the next 100 years in West Plymouth, because that's not the case. The booster station is probably a 5-year fix that will provide redundancy as soon as a new well comes online. I mean, those are the facts.
Mr. Quintal.
Derek, correct me because I'm a little confused a little bit here with this booster station. A booster station is what moves water to different parts of the town. It's not a well.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
That's right.
Anyone else? Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? Discussion. Mr. Helm.
I understand that it's important to deal with this agreement, but pursuant to the couple of items that Selectman Mahoney requested, I'd actually like to read those. I am in agreement with voting yes on this development agreement, but I think that because I like to see as much information as possible, and I always have, I would like to see that information before I make a decision on this development agreement, although I have a tendency to understand. Even after reading it, I will likely agree with the agreement.
Anyone else? Mr. Brandisi, do you think we could have that information by next week?
The rate analysis?
No. The paperwork.
The appeal.
Oh, the ZBA.
And the appeal and the ZBA.
You have the appeal in your inbox now. I have
Okay.
to ask Lee Hartman for the ZBA decision. I can get that.
So can we put this on next week's, we'll table it for the vote and put this on next week's agenda for a vote? Or are there any time constraints?
Say that again?
Are there any time
No, there are
constraints?
no time, no.
So could we?
Given
put
the
this-
appeal, there are no time constraints at this time.
Okay, so Mr. Helm, and I'd actually like to see it myself, I'm sure the rest of the board would as well. Do we have an issue with that?
I have faith in the town manager, but.
I do too.
So do I.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Blitzer, do you care to withdraw your motion?
Yeah, I'll withdraw it till next week.
And Mr. Quintal will
Yes.
withdraw? So we'll
So-
get this, and
Oh.
please make this,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to table this issue to a future date, which is Tuesday, January 10th.
and put, could, Go
I'll
ahead.
second that motion.
all those in favor? Unanimous. And Derek, would you put that as the first order of business?
Absolutely. And Attorney Bergeron just brought to my attention, I was just reviewing the appeal. Exhibit 1 is the ZBA decision. So you have it all.
Is it a lengthy document? Oh, okay.
It's only 48 pages.
Excuse me, through the chair.
Lovely.
Hey, Betty, it's 7:30, let's move on.
I was going to ask you to read it into the wet record, but never mind.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we have the joint budget meeting with the school committee and also advisory and finance scheduled for 6:05 on January 10th.
Why don't we start the meeting at 5:30? Okay, you're welcome. The next is Plymouth Development. And the reason why we put this on the agenda is because we have had, there have been a couple meetings out there, and Mr. Bulletin, you can't hide behind Mr. Gould. And I know the board members have had several questions, and I know Mr. Helm has been with you at these meetings, so we kind of wanted to bring it to the forefront just to say, just kind of explain to residents, because everybody's getting yielded a bunch of questions. So I don't know if you want to just give a brief explanation. I know that Mr. Quintal and Mr. Blitzer, and actually all of us are, we're concerned about economic development, but I know that has been something for those two select persons since they've been on the board, and actually even before that. So, Mr. Bulletin, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Bulletin, Precinct 15. There has been, to my knowledge, one meeting was held at the Center for Active Living with Select Board Member Helm. The purpose of the meeting was because, as we have heard repeatedly, information gets bandied about in town which may be correct, incorrect, partially correct, and it leads to people having a lot of questions. But unlike the Select Board, the Planning Board and the ZBA don't have a question time. There isn't an opportunity for the public to come up and ask questions. And there's a legitimate reason for that. We are quasi-judicial boards, and our statements have legal ramifications. So we don't answer hypothetical questions. I felt and do feel that it is absolutely essential for the residents of Plymouth to have accurate information. To that end, I've made myself available to answer resident questions about development. And I have made it very clear, anytime I have spoken, I speak personally on my own behalf, not on behalf of the planning board, not on behalf of the select board, not on behalf of any other board, commission, committee, employee, or elected official of the town. Just me. Here's my 2 cents. Here's the information I have, and here's where I got it. And if you have questions, I'll try and answer them. If I don't have the information, I'll try and get it for you. And I'll tell you exactly where I get it so you know whether or not it's accurate. And that's what I'm trying to do in town. Only because I think it's essential. I think if nothing else, the discussions we've had here tonight show how important it is that people have correct information when trying to come up with decisions, trying to understand what's going on in development. We keep hearing, we've heard tonight, oh, the walk and the oasis. And, well, they're 40B. What does that mean? People have a misunderstanding as to what that means. How does it occur? What goes on? Why is the town letting this happen? The town doesn't just let things happen. There's laws, there's rules, there's regulations, there's procedures. We follow them. If we follow them, there are certain outcomes that we have discretion over and certain outcomes we don't. Just trying to explain to the residents why it is what happens, and more to the point, especially given what's going on with our master plan aspirations, trying to also get the input from the residents. Well, if this is what's happening, what can we do about it? Well, here's a couple of our options. Which way would you like to go? What do you think is important? It's important for me to get that input as chair of the master plan task group, just as other members of that task group are going out and doing the exact same thing in their select groups. So this was just merely an effort to A, provide information, and B, receive information. But certainly nothing is being said or done that says this is what will happen in Plymouth. I don't have that control. I'm just one citizen with a couple of board positions who's trying to get the correct information out there.
Excellent.
But if the members of the select board have questions, I am happy to answer them.
Mr. Helm.
As the person who organized this discussion with Mr. Bulletin and myself and residents at the COW, I feel that it's incumbent upon me to speak. I didn't realize that this agenda item was about that meeting or the 2 requests that we have for meetings of a similar sort in other parts of the town. The question, the meeting was organized at the request of members of the CAL. Residents who are members, senior members of our community requested that this discussion take place. That is the genesis of it. But it speaks to something that Steve spoke to. I would say that the large majority of the residents of Plymouth are, number one, deeply concerned about the development in this town. Its impact on our lifestyle, our taxes, our environment. They're deeply concerned. Also, at the same time, from questions that I fielded, not only at the CAL, but in other areas, and seeing some of the stuff blow by my eyes on Facebook, there is a great deal of lack of understanding of what processes actually control. I've seen enough comments and heard enough comments and had enough directed to me, whether it's at private messages or text, that when are you going to get to the bottom of who in town administration and government is making all the money that is allowing these developments to go forward. Okay? I mean, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of how this process works and a misunderstanding of the general concept, as Steve pointed out. The conversation is largely about explaining the ramifications of 40B for this town. Okay, and that I just felt the need to explain this was not an attempt to promote an agenda item or anything, and also every member of the community, including other members of boards, and there was, Mr. Canty from the Finance Committee was there. There were others. Everybody's welcome to attend these and chime in. And this is about transparency, and this is about communication, and my feeling that the people of this town who are deeply concerned about development don't understand why things are happening. So anyway, I just felt the need to make that statement.
I'm deeply concerned about development, as you well know.
And I would echo what Mr. Helms said. Not only are welcome to attend, are encouraged to attend. I welcome and encourage everybody to communicate with whomever they feel to get the information. If you have questions, ask the question. I've always said there is no such thing as a dumb question. There are some dumb answers, but there is no such thing as a dumb question. It is critical that people get information, and that's why I've always been as clear, as transparent as I can be, which is to say, this is the information I have, and I'll tell you exactly where I got it. You don't have to guess whether or not I'm making it up or I'll tell you where I got it. And if I don't have information, I'm not going to make it up. I'll tell you I don't have it, and I'll go get it for you. And I think that's the important part. We're just trying to be as many public servants as we can doing this to try and encourage really responsible development in this town. And the only way that can happen is with knowledgeable discussion.
The amount of misinformation is astounding. They think that the select board are the ones that approve all the building. We're the ones, like you said, we're making the money is, from what some people are saying. It's actually ridiculous.
Just real quickly, and then you're going to call on Charlie. This misinformation originates in misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not a purposeful spreading of misinformation. It starts with misunderstanding, and that is what Steve and I were attempting to do in a small way. And we, like I said, we've had other requests, is to go group by group and explain as best we can the realities of what is going on, and what needs to be, what needs to happen in terms of not what we think needs to happen, but citizen involvement in what needs to happen, because of the type of government we have, which is all about citizen involvement. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Charlie, I'm sorry.
Steve, I'd just like to commend you, Harry, yourself also, for providing a forum where people can get correct information and not misinformation and not propaganda, okay? So I commend you for doing that. We can have development that's smart, that works with the environmentalists. And that's what you can explain to people. We should all be able to work together, the boards, with the environmentalists, with the developers, and come up with projects that will be good for the town. So I'm glad you're doing these forums, and people can ask questions, and they're going to get the right answers, or the correct answers, I should say.
I hope so. I think
and if you don't have the answer, you'll get back to them.
I will get it. I think Mr. Quintal said the word that I've used many times before as well tonight: balance. The town needs to balance its development, and that means responsibility all around.
We want quality of life, but we also need to keep our taxes stabilized. so we can all live here.
We need lots of things, and we need to balance them in proportion to the desires of the residents of the town. And that's ultimately what our master plan is going to be going forward on.
Mr. Quintel.
Thank you. Well, we have a few members of the planning board here. I want to reach out and ask that maybe we have a round table. I'm open for suggestions as to how we move forward in reaching these goals or areas of town we'd like to see developed and what kind of development we like. I know that's a lot I just threw out there, but I think it's a missing link. There's miscommunication between the boards, and I think we could clean some of that out, and it would only help the master plan.
I think that's absolutely correct, and I understand that the chairs of the planning board and the select board have been in communication and are working to schedule a joint meeting, something to come up soon so that we can do that. The planning board has its strategy meeting scheduled for the 11th of January itself. So obviously I welcome citizen participation in that. If people want to come and suggest to us where we think our efforts should lie in terms of true planning, we want to hear from the residents. But we are going to be doing our strategizing, and then we're going to bring that to the select board and talk to you about how we can jointly move those ideas forward.
Well, one of the things that, like I said, I appreciate, and I'm always joking with either you or him, it's like the Harry and Steve going on the road show. So we might have to come up with a name. So
unfortunately, I think someone's already suggested Mutt and Jeff, and I think that was taken.
Who's Mutt? But one of the things that I think, especially this board, recognizes sometimes that you can tell someone the actual facts of what's going on, and it just doesn't matter because in their head, that's not their fact. So I wish you the absolute best of luck because we've had to deal with that scenario several times, and honestly, it's, I mean, who can lie? I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. I couldn't possibly remember if something was not factual.
Well,
So.
you can lead a horse to water, as
Right,
they say.
correct.
But
You can.
That's our goal, to at least lead the horses to water.
Yes, I appreciate it, and thank you for coming in and, kind of setting the record straight so people know. And I do believe the road show is moving to the Little Red Schoolhouse?
Yes, on January 19th, but I can't remember the time of day.
January
More-
19th.
More to come.
More to come. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, members.
Take care.
Madam Chair.
Oh, is there someone that needs, Miss Kuhn?
Ms. Keene.
Keen. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
I was just waiting to be unmuted. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, my name is Brigitte Keene. So, and I am on the planning board. I'm not sure if this is redundant because my Zoom cut out for a minute, but I have been advocating for the joint meeting between the planning board and the select board that is required in our charter on a yearly basis. I believe we have skipped a couple of years, and I'm hoping that we can catch up with that because what you have been discussing tonight, particularly around development, is of extreme interest, of course, to the planning board. That's what we do. And being able to coordinate with the select board so that Mr. Bulletin has new, and Mr. Helm has new and updated information is definitely what everyone on the planning board wishes will happen. Thank you.
Yes, that you must have cut out when we were discussing that. Mr. Grandy and I have been in touch, and we are trying to set up a joint meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Mr. Brindisi, the town manager's report.
Okay, I'll keep this quick. So just talking about revenues, it was reported to me this morning that our hotel and motel taxes are up by 16% from the same time last year. So that's positive news that things are still trending in the positive direction. And then our meals tax, which, as you know, we have a special act on how we use our meals tax, is up 3% from the same time last year as well. Certainly not trending as well as hotel and motel revenues, but still trending in the positive direction. On the flip side of this, our marijuana excise that we receive through the marijuana facilities is down by 50%. So again, we theorize part of it is that there's an oversaturation of these marijuana facilities, not only in the town, but certainly in the region, throughout the state. So we're starting to see a decrease in those revenues as compared to the same quarter last year. So that is the 3% excise tax that we've negotiated an agreement with. I also want to bring to your attention that there's been some changes in the state law regarding the marijuana impact fees. So we're still working with town council on what that really means to the town at this point, but I can tell you that the city of Boston has already given back about $1.5 million in impact fees. We're expecting within the next year or so we will have to no longer accept impact fees. So again, we don't budget for the impact fees. It normally falls to our bottom line and falls to free cash. But again, we'll see a difference in our free cash moving forward. I want to also announce, as of last week, we were notified that the town received a $2.5 million federal award for the wastewater treatment plant. This is for the new tertiary project. This is a large credit to our engineering department, DPW, and Tiffany Park, who put this application together through Congressman Keating's advocacy and Senator Markey's advocacy. We were able to receive this $2.5 million. And then two more items I just want to bring up that we've talked a lot about going online with our electronic e-permitting system through the Inspection Services Department. We're expected to go live in less than 30 days. So effective February 1st, homeowners, contractors, and others can pull permits online. They no longer have to come to Town Hall to pull a permit. So we hopefully that'll make the town of Plymouth being a little bit more business friendly. And last, I just want to mention that the fire chief brought to my attention today that, again, maybe some of this has to do with development, that the fire department has seen an increase in by 22% in their call volume during the calendar year 22. That's a 22% increase. That's a substantial increase to the number of calls that they had to respond to this past year. So we'll continue to monitor that. Maybe it has to do with development. Maybe some of it has to do with the fact that there weren't as many calls during the COVID years, and we're just starting to get back to more of a realistic number. So more to come on that. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
Anyone? Oh, John?
Derek, I don't know if you didn't touch on it tonight. I don't know if it was the last meeting, but the announcement that we became a green communities.
Yes, I think I did mention it the last, but we did receive a press release today. There was a joint by now outgoing Governor Baker, that announced that Plymouth was one of 4 communities that received this green community certification. So, again, a lot of work with Patrick Farah, Mark Reel, and others to submit that, and the Green Communities Committee as a whole to submit that application.
That took, I think there was a couple of cracks at town meeting initially that didn't get passed, but eventually, and you're right, I think Patrick Farah was the point person on that one. It took a few attempts, but finally it got passed, and I think the community first started working on that almost a decade ago. Right. So congratulations to all the town employees that worked on that.
Anyone else? Let's see. Okay. Thanks, Derek. Next is Select Board Open Discussion, New Business, Letters, and Old Business. Mr. Quintal? No? Anyone? Oh, Mr. Helm.
Yeah, I was just wondering, could we get an update? And I don't know, maybe doesn't have to wait till next week. The ice rink. where do we stand on getting that put up? Or are we going to?
We have a meeting tomorrow with the DPW to have that conversation. We actually had the conversation this morning, and there are questions as to what is the most optimal location. So we're going to discuss tomorrow where the DPW feels it's a better location.
So just so you know, Harry, I brought this up to Mr. Brandisi a couple weeks ago, and, it's problematic, not any fault of Derek, that we, every year, and since I've been on the board, every year, I've had to remind them about the skating rink. That should be automatic. It's winter, the skating rink goes up, and this year, I'm even more concerned. Obviously, the weather pattern isn't helping us at all. Briggs Field is still level as it was last year. The fire chief doesn't feel that there's any issue filling it like we did last year, although it is my understanding that the DPW director does. But, this should be on autopilot. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the Stevens Field project. We had discussions that there would have been the ability to put the skating rink in that project, and I have not heard anything regarding that, because that would be the perfect central location for the entire town, and then we could still, and it would have to be refrigerated. And we could still use the rink in little satellite areas. But that was the entire plan of having a community skating rink right from the get-go. And I don't know what the Stevens Fields Design Committee has done as of recent. I know that it was something I discussed with the CPC, and I want to know if it's possible to actually incorporate something like that, because that is something that you could use year-round. Because when they do a refrigerated rink, as you know, if you go to Boston or any of those places, they pour a pad, and that pad is, you can use it as a patio, you can use it as different things, and when it comes wintertime, they put up walls and they flood it, and it's a skating rink, and it's refrigerated, and it's fabulous, because who wouldn't want to skate at the ocean? And originally, that was supposed to be part of the whole Winterfest theme that the town wants to go towards, which is another discussion I would like to have, because I think the town of Plymouth needs to be the ones that do Winterfest. A couple years ago, it was $40,000. It's probably up to $60,000, but the amount of revenue that it brought in for our meals and hotel tax well outweighed that. So I don't know if that's something, if it's too late for this warrant, if it can go on special or whatever it is, but I think maybe have it as an agenda item. When does special close, or has it already?
I can take a look to see when it closes.
It closes
I think you got to.
the beginning of February.
Yeah, you got like the entire month of January.
So let's get that on an agenda so we as a board can discuss that, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. We're definitely going to have an agenda item while that special warrant is open, so that board members can place articles on the special as well. So-
And when you go to your summit, CPC summit, could you please bring up that skating rink option? And John, I don't know if I'm going to be there or not, so, but I think if it's not in the plan, we need to put it in the plan.
I can tell you it's not in the plan, so this is something we certainly can bring up.
So in the CPC meetings that I've attended in the last 7 months, the topic has never come up. I was in the basement of the Art Center. What was that, Derek, December 8th? Mm-hmm. And it was probably 20 to 30 people in the room. And the main point of that meeting was that Jonathan Beater, your DPW director, got up and asked for a little bit of leeway with respect to some of the aspects of the project. And I would say, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, almost 90% of the discussion revolved around how many tennis courts, how many pickleball courts. You know, the age-old discussion, pickleball versus tennis. But the committee ultimately voted unanimously to give Mr. Beta the option of reducing tennis courts from 4 to 3, which would free up would bring the cost like $200,000 less. And there was a couple of other things that they signed off on, and I think that's going out to bid in a few months or soon.
Yeah, they're going to move to 100% design based upon that last vote.
Right, so obviously that's going to be, the big question is what those bids come in at. But that variable that you were referring to, that was never mentioned.
It was mentioned when I was the CPC liaison, and I know that they were going to have the power capacity able to take a refrigerated system. Now, since I am no longer the liaison, and you, sir, are, I think that, and I can call Bill myself.
I know that you have the ability to do that.
But it really is, it's something that we've spoken of even when you and I were on the board before, and we've had that conversation. And so I don't know why it just failed, or no one addressed it again, or?
I don't know if, who was it, Derek, was it Weston and Sampson did the design?
I think it was one of those engineering firms we use all the
So
time.
I don't know if they were asked to incorporate that into the design, Betty. And then, of course, the other variable is how much is it? So I don't know those things.
Right, and now that we have that additional piece of land right on.
Sandwich.
Right. Perfect spot. So.
I hope to see you on the 12th.
Mr. Quinto.
Just to chime in on that, I don't know really about putting that there, only because I don't know how far they are, but But what I would like to ask to look at, if we're going to do it in the future, is I know Duxbury, and I think it's Cohasset, have sports complexes. That's the big new thing now. I think if we're going to put our efforts into that, then we should really, I'm sure recreation is got to be part of that if I know those towns, but those are very wealthy towns. But
Well,
I'd like to see what
Right.
exactly they do there and get the numbers.
I have communicated with an organization regarding a sports complex. I think you and I discussed it. It was kind of flatlined for a little bit because of COVID and all that stuff. So, but I know Mr. Chandler actually made the connection for us. So that's something, and they want to go gun ho. So maybe that's another option that we can.
We go big or go home.
Go big or go home. So, but anyone else? Okay, so now we have license and administrative notes. And I believe Mr. Bletzer has asked something regarding one of the notes.
Yeah, the first one, is anybody there from second one? I just had, I had some questions I would have asked ahead of time, but Lisa was off, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So you're trying to open up a pop-up beer tent is what it says, beer garden. I see on your license, you're using, on your application, you're using 11 Main Street. And that's a vacant, that's not a going business there, is it?
Well, it's still under construction, but we've been paying for license renewal for 3 years. So we've been issued the licensing from the town. We just haven't opened because we don't have a certificate of occupancy.
And 35 Main Street is where you want to put this.
Right. So our future location is partnered with Patty Cho from Kogi, and she's the new owner of 35 Main Street. She has no intention of opening. Her plan for that building is to move Kogi into there towards the end of her lease on Court Street. So for the next 6 to 9 months, that building's going to remain idle. So through the winter, when there's no one occupying it, it was a way for us to utilize the space where we have we have 6 seats per our zoning on Howland Street. So to have a spot that has 70-plus capacity during the coldest months of the year when our business struggles, in a building where she's paying utilities and rent with no plans to open, it was kind of a win-win for both of us. There's currently no licensing in that building, so we were looking to issue just to use that space no differently if we were trying to use any other venue within town. It just happens to be one that has been set up for a bar.
See, that's the problem I have with this proposal. Basically, you want to go into a vacant business in our downtown area, which is, quite frankly, saturated with licenses, liquor licenses. And Kenny, you don't take this wrong. You run a great business. You got a great operation. Your beer gardens, I know you do them other places. And you're a good tourist attraction for the town, having a brewery. So, and I'm probably the most pro-business guy on this board. I just have a problem with allowing somebody to come into the downtown with the saturated with liquor licenses and running a weekend operation for 30 days through March, and arguably the slowest days of the year for the downtown area. And I just, being a pro-business guy, I don't think it's fair to the other license holders to let this happen. So the people that pay into the sewer, the water, all those other things, and it's not a reflection on you. And I think you're thinking out of the box. You're very innovative. But if we do this, we're going to set a precedent. And what's to stop the store down the street saying in the summer it's slow downtown? My shop is slow. So on the weekends, let's get somebody to come in and do some one-day licenses on the weekend, and we'll do a beer garden in our store. We're setting a precedent for that. So I think I'm very concerned, and I'm not crazy about this idea. Sure. And it's if you were trying to get 31-day licenses in an area that had no licenses around there was a need for it, I'd be all for you, and I'd give it to you in a heartbeat. But so that's I just want to be honest with you and upfront
no problem.
How I feel. So
yeah, I feel it's an area that's saturated with licenses as well as saturated with empty buildings. Ours is obviously one of them also. I think having the latitude within the one-day license, any business could do this. So if a business was to say, we want to have, our art store wants to hold wine on the weekends, there's nothing outside of the MGL that prevents them from doing that other than standing here and requesting the same thing.
But we don't have to approve that.
Understood, but I'm just saying, in terms of setting a precedent, that's my only point, is that there's nothing outside. I'm not stretching any provision that's already provided for in the MGL and through the ABCC. This is a building that has no licenses, so I couldn't go into Patty's other spot.
No, you can't go into a licensed premise. I understand.
So I know you understand that.
Yeah, I understand
obviously.
all that. But my thing is just the precedent, and there's, I talked to a couple license holders who won't publicly say anything, but they weren't happy about it. And you have a great reputation. Yeah. I don't want to destroy that. So
no, I appreciate that, and I'll admit we didn't necessarily advertise that we wanted to do this because we could see there'd be some concern about competition or other things, but
that's another problem too, is nobody seemed to know about this, and that's a big problem. Normally, the abutters get noticed, at least I think the license holders, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think they should.
Well, we followed the process. There is no abutters notice requirement.
No, but
we've given notice to the town. It's been public. It's been notified that we're going to have this hearing here.
Right.
And the reality is, we're not looking. I have 9 people who look to me for income through the winter.
I get it.
In a place where we can only hold 29 people based on the license the town has given us. I have the ability to triple that to bring in income through the winter to keep those people with more money. Yeah. It's the best thing for my business. It's a space that's being unutilized downtown. In a town full of, there's between there and the Spire Center, there's 7 open, empty buildings.
Well, you have one that's open, and I encourage you, hopefully you can get that pub in there that you want to do and get that going as soon as possible, so.
Understood,
you can,
but
you
I
know,
mean, it
so-
took 22 months to get Eversource to make our electric connection before we could even get the specifications to build our brew house. We're pivoting. This is still like COVID for us. Like, we're still a struggling business trying to make do with what we've got. And this was, honestly, I don't think we're doing anything outside of, by requesting this or requesting anything that's, I mean, it's Friday through Saturday. It's not permanent. I purposely didn't put in for 7 days a week.
No, and that's the other thing, is you're putting in for the best 3 days, and, which is when people, if anybody's doing any business, it's on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And again, Kenny, you're thinking out of the box. I like your
I know, but it feels
innovation.
like it feels like you're coming down on me for being someone who's being proactive.
I'm not
Other businesses need to survive on their own merit.
I'm not coming down on you. I'm saying I think you're innovative, but I got to think of the other licenses that I don't think it's fair to them. That's just how I feel.
Okay.
So, and again, I know your operation, and you guys have run a great operation, but I don't think it's fair to the other license holders that are around there. If you're in the same position, I think you'd feel the same way. You understand.
To a degree, but I'm not doing anything that any of them are not able to do also. And I feel sometimes
Well,
the
that's the
business in
thing.
Plymouth needs to be a little more thought
Yeah, Kenny, that's the
provoking.
thing. This could set a precedent that we could have all this happen all over the place. And it's. I know in Boston they're having a problem with these one-day these breweries with licenses, and I don't want to have that problem. So anyway, that's how I feel.
appreciate
So,
the debate. I think
But
the
the
Boston
rest of the-
example, a lot of this is driven through MRA, and the MRA, the restaurants in the MRA could also apply for these licenses. There's nothing specific to this about breweries.
I get it.
We're using what's legally available to us to try to
I
expand
know.
our business.
I'm not saying you're not. And again, there's 5 people there. I'm just.
No,
I'm just stating
I appreciate that.
how I feel, and I'm honest, and that's how I feel about this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney.
Kenny, so what's the status with 11 Court?
So we're on our
Main.
3rd general contractor. We just finally got the electrical connection, as I mentioned, after 2 years of fighting with Eversource. We have the final quotes in to complete the space. The tap room's completed except for the sprinklers, which was the last piece. We've had numerous meetings with the fire department and the building department, so we have a plan forward and the quotes to finish the space, but it's not going to happen before May or June. So we're just looking for a way to scrape by while we've been paying rent on a building for 38 months that we haven't been able to produce any income from.
So in a perfect world, you're going to open up sometime this summer?
This summer, yeah.
Okay, so 35 Main. So that structure, that building there where you want to put in these, 30 or 35 temporary?
Yeah, it's 10 weekends.
31-day wine and malt licenses. So
Basically, we just want to move our tap room from Howland Street to, on those 3 days, we just want to operate from a larger space where we're not constrained by the 29.
So for those 3 days, or those 30 days, Howland Street will be closed.
Correct.
You're just going to shift your entire operation over there.
Correct. Otherwise, I'd have to double staff, and if I have a more convenient, warmer, larger space downtown, we would not expect people to also want to go
So what are the hours you're going to have open on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
noon to, I mean, right now we operate from noon to 10 on those days, so that's what we're talking about.
Are you going to ask for a food, common vic?
At the moment, no. Actually, no, we're not going to ask for it all, no.
Okay, and that place is ready for you to go in for the 30 dates?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Patty's our partner on the new space. She's running the kitchen in 11 Main Street. So when she bought it, I actually reached out to the previous owners because our former taproom manager owned Roll Street Tavern. So I'd asked him for, hey, what are you guys doing with that space? I knew they owned the building. He said it's being sold. I could put 2 and 2 together. I waited, talked to Patty. Patty said, we're not going to do anything with that until the end of the year. So I'm helping her break even on her utilities, keep the place heated.
Right.
Paying, towards her rent while it's empty.
So, again, I just echoing what Charlie said, I certainly appreciate your thinking outside the box. I just want to let you know that in the past, on the waterfront, and I can go to the Pine Hills Beer Garden, those were all one-day licenses. Specifically, I can reference a waterfront restaurant where there ended up being unforeseen consequences in certain neighborhoods, and they thought that the one-day liquor license was kind of circumventing what the intent was of that. It's not like the Hedge House having what is it called, Bachtoberfest or something to that effect, and they're trying to raise money over the course of one day, 4 or 8 hours on a Sunday. So that's my concern. But you're up there on Main Street. I don't think you're going to negatively impact parking, but I've seen it happen in the past, where people take exception to maybe, there's kind of like a circumvention of the
Wouldn't it be
rule.
great if we had too many people come to Plymouth during February?
Sure would.
Well, wouldn't it be great if it was like the old days and we could count on some weather under 32 degrees for a while? But that's what my point is. I've seen it happen in the past. People unhappy with a quote unquote circumvention of what has been normally done.
So is there anyone else that wants to, any board members? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Quinto.
Yeah, so just so I got this right, you're actually going to operate in the former restaurant, Roll Street Tavern, for the 30 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you're really moving into a restaurant. Popped up tent to me is you put up a tent and, you got heat if it's cold and, you take
Well, I never
the tent
mentioned the word
down.
tent. I'm just using the latitude within
So
the
you're
one-day
moving
license.
into a restaurant.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
The beer garden.
Right. Okay.
It's currently a vacant building that used to be a restaurant, yes.
Okay. And this is just on the weekend dates. And the problem I have with this is not what you're trying to do, and I really understand it, but I think as a town, we shouldn't set a precedence for, where do we draw a line? Give you an example. I have a warehouse. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to do a pop-up beer garden. I'm going to take Friday, Saturday, Sundays. I probably can get a couple hundred people in there. I could make a barrel of money too, and I struggle in the winter just like everyone else does. So I do hear that, but I think it's unfair to all your neighbors, if you will, on that street that have to, get health inspections, have to have fire inspections, safety, pay their dues, pay their licenses, and their insurances and their taxes. And I don't know, did I hear you say having no food? Because I thought with alcohol, you had to have food.
I said we weren't getting a count because we don't intend to run it as a restaurant, but we could bring in food vendors.
I thought to serve alcohol, you had to serve some kind of food. That was my understanding.
I don't think he does food now on Howland, correct?
Correct.
Right. So, okay, thank you.
Are you gentlemen done now? Oh.
Well, I was going to wait until after a motion and a second, but and I'm having real trouble around this because I totally understand why Kenny's doing what he's doing. But my problem is these one-day liquor license were never, ever designed or thought of that somebody would grab 30 of them in a row, basically, and open a bar. Okay, I don't think that is, in fact, that's not the intent of the one-day liquor license. And I know that a single applicant can ask for 30 of them. But I do not believe that it was ever the intent of that law to create something like this. So I have a problem. I understand why he would propose this, particularly given something that he stated that it was not in our information, that he intended to close Howland Street on those 3 days. Okay, and just basically do the business he's doing now in a different, larger location. So it's, I'm really torn on this one. I understand why he's doing it. It makes sense. It's a better proposition to me that now that Kenny has basically told us that he's planning to close Howland down for those 3 days. But I still am having trouble getting around that this is not the intention of the one-day liquor licenses, and it does, as Mr. Bletzer mentioned, it does create the opportunity for precedent setting. That, you know, in every business, every restaurant bar owner's desire is to expand the business, given everything going on with COVID, trying to keep people employed and paid during the winter. But do we open ourselves up to, you know, the concept of creating a precedent that could spin into things that we really, really don't want to see. So,
Oh,
you want to say something?
go ahead, you go first.
Real quick, Kenny, one last thing. Sure. Is you do beer gardens, do you do Bramhalls? Okay, and you all, do you do head shops too?
No, that's Mayflower.
So how many licenses do you pull at Bramhalls?
If your question's towards the total, we have.
Because you can only get 30.
We have two business. We have the business on 11 and business on Howland Street, so we have 30 for each.
So what's the business on Howland Street?
Tap room and kitchen.
It's what?
Second Wind Brewing Tap Room and Kitchen.
This says Second Wind Tap Room and Kitchen on 11 Main Street.
Correct. Business on Howland Street is Second Wind Brewing Company.
Oh, it's a different, so it's.
Yeah, they're
it's a
two different
entity?
entities, yeah.
Okay. Because I just want to let you know, you can only get 30, I believe, so you.
That's the reason why this hearing
why
was
when I
was
saw
delayed. I
this-
actually put in for these licenses 4 weeks ago, but Lisa and I had to go back and forth in terms of the.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're clear on that.
No,
so-
very clear. Thanks.
And I think there's something coming up on the 19th.
On the 19th, yep, 10:30.
Yeah, we
I'll be
should
here.
all go there so we understand. A lot of people don't understand the ABC licenses, so.
Yep, I'll be there.
Anyway, Kenny, thanks.
Yep.
I'm going to speak now. Everybody's done, right? Yeah. So my thought is, he's not doing anything that is wrong because we already have a policy in place. He's allowed to apply for 30 liquor licenses or one-day licenses. So he's shutting down one. He's opening another. He's just moving the location for a little bit bigger to bring in a little bit more business for his what he does. So my suggestion would be to approve this 30-day, one-day liquor licenses and then work on a policy that addresses more of what the other board members have said. Because he's doing exactly what we allow him to do through the policy. So he's not doing anything wrong. And he's right. Every single one of those people that are on Main Street, Court Street, Scobie Circle, wherever, have the same opportunity to do it. So I think if you want to change the policy that we have in place, then we figure something out with the town manager, and he can make suggestions for it. But that's no reason to deny this, because he's literally shutting down one business and going somewhere else, which is right around the corner. So it's not affecting anyone any more or less than it would have if he stayed at Howland Street. And then if we need to tighten up a policy about one-day licenses, then you know what? Then maybe it shouldn't be 30 days. Maybe a one-day license is 5 days, or maybe we require them to apply for a liquor license. Whatever it is, he is working within the realms of our policy, and I think it would be fundamentally unfair to reject it.
Madam Chairwoman, I don't think it's our policy. I think this policy is set by the ABC and the governor, and I think it's a little bit bigger than that. And we talked earlier about looking at policy. I think we need to visit this one. But, you know, we're all entitled to our opinion. But we do not have a policy, nor do we set these policies, where the ABC does.
I'll move approval, pending discussion, a second in discussion.
Second. Just go ahead, Mr. Helm.
Nowhere in the materials, I'm inclined to go with this because he is acting within the realm. But I see nowhere in Kenny's materials that he's committed to closing Howland Street in those 3 days. So
He just said he was.
he said he
I
was.
happen to be, but again, if I really want to, I mean, I'm not required to,
Well, he's not required to, so.
but we happen to be. For the purpose of this argument, yes, I'm closing Howland Street on those days purely because I don't need to hire more staffing to have an empty place sit idle, but I'm not required to.
I guess my question is to Mr. Mahoney. Would you be willing to change your motion to motion for approval with the inclusion of the closing of the Howland Street operation during the days of these licenses?
I don't think you can do that legally. No.
Can I weigh in?
Okay.
Betty, no disrespect, but Kenny, you run a great business. Betty, you can't. You're trying to be all things to all people, okay? This is. I know.
No, I'm trying to go by with the laws that govern businesses. I don't.
I know, but
Listen, you should know me by now. I could care less what people think.
all I'm saying is you got to put you in business.
I don't know how much clearer I can be about
The
that.
slowest time of the year, we're going to allow a business to come in on the weekends, the busiest times.
And everybody else can do it.
I know, but that's my point. You're going to set a precedent for every store in Plymouth that there's some of the stores in downtown are very slow in the summer. They're busier in the winter. You're setting a precedent for these pop-up beer
I'm
gardens.
setting a precedent to abide by the laws that we're governed under.
Okay.
I guess the question I would have is if I wanted to do this on the end of Spring Street behind the Grist Mill, or if I wanted to do it somewhere else, I mean, is the issue that it's on Main Street? Because
Yes, that's the issue for me,
I mean,
is where it's located.
the law can't determine, I'm within the jurisdiction of Plymouth.
No, but we have a right to approve or not approve.
Understood. I'm not
That's
questioning
all.
that, but I'm
It's
saying-
nothing about legalities. It's just my opinion.
The piece that we're
This is
picking
not
apart here is that
this
it's
not a-
competition. Other people still have a choice to where they want to spend their dollars. Just because I'm not there, I'm not going to close down 7 businesses unless people don't choose to go there. And those businesses have to compete on their own. If anything, I'm bringing more business to Main Street because I've moved to a location that more people can come to. They can go across the street for Sukasa. They can order pizza and bring it in from Main Street. They can go to New World Tavern. They can throw axes after they come to us. If anything, we're drawing more people to that area. And I get that people see us as a threat because we do things like this because we're about pushing boundaries and growing the business. Plymouth needs to think that way more often.
I'll leave it up to the board, but I'm not going to vote to approve this.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
So just building off of what Harry had mentioned earlier, I didn't know that variable, Kenny, that you were going to shut down your existing business for the 3 days that you were going to transition. So that aspect of the whole thing leads me to support this. And then I think by July 4th, you're going to be 50 feet down the sidewalk anyways.
Right.
And if everything goes...
God willing.
Yeah, God willing. So you're going to be, you certainly anticipate no later than next Christmas, being in 11, and you're telling me that somebody else is going to be occupying 35, correct?
Yeah, Kogi will.
Right. So given those two variables, I have no problem supporting this. And the one scenario that happened 4 to 6 years ago, 4 miles south of here, when there was issues, that was brought to the board's attention, and the board addressed it and made certain changes. So I know that you know that if there are problems, we'll have you in here at the next Tuesday meeting.
Sure.
Correct?
Of course.
Okay.
Harry?
Kenny, I just want to confirm that you're telling us that you will be closing Howland Street during those 3 days for the
Correct.
30?
Yeah, we have no intention of running both.
Okay, so you will be closing. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Do we have a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? 3 in favor, 2 opposed. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good luck. Thank you.
All right, now we have license and administrative notes. Unless there are any that you folks have questions on, I'll ask to move them as a group.
Madam Chair, the the minutes for November 15th, 2022. The project was not approved at this moment. Is that correct? It was tabled?
Yes.
Correct. So
So do you need to, we'll remove those? Okay. And we'll remove the administrative note that Mr. Sinesi just mentioned. Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
Motion to move as a group?
Do I have a second? Discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, and last but not least is the motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion to adjourn, and we'll see you next week.